Yo, parish orphans and retrogrades, to the sequel episode of Why is the 4th of July such a depressing holiday? I'm forgetting if that's exactly what we called it, and I'm suspecting I didn't call the first part that. But that's what it is. When we say July the 4th is a dead letter of a celebration. I once saw a great meme on Facebook, and it went like this. There's a grandfather and his grandson watching 4th of July fireworks, and the grandson asks the grandfather, "What are we celebrating today?" And the grandfather says that this was at one point a great country. That's what it is. That's all we're celebrating on July 4th. And in the first video done earlier today, I've never done 2 sequel videos in one day. I'll explain that in a second. I explained to you how America is in the midst of our 3rd constitutional regime. The first, from 1776 to 1788, was called the Articles of Confederation, and it was purely confederated. Now you know what that term was. I'd say the closest thing to the approximation that the Catholic intellectual tradition gives for what counts as really good government. The second constitutional regime was part consolidated, part confederated in Imperium and Imperio. It went from 1788 or 1791 until 1868. That is the ratification of the new Constitution, together with its Bill of Rights, which took 3 years, until the illegal ratification of the 14th Amendment in 1868. This was Lincoln's dream, and it was illegally ratified. It's a done deal. We're not getting that one back. But that ended the second legal regime of part confederation, part consolidation once we moved to the 14th Amendment, which is the new Constitution. That is the 3rd constitutional regime that America has operated under. It's purely consolidated in much the same way that the Articles of Confederation were purely confederated. And it's the only of the 3 constitutional regimes running from 1868 until today that is, I would say, purely bad. It operates under no longer the general police powers, the subsidiarity, the states' rights, the federalism, whatever you want to call it, localism, 5 terms for the same thing, of the 10th Amendment, which codifies Catholic subsidiarity, or Article 1, Section 8 of that same Constitution, which also codifies Catholic subsidiarity. That's all done. Now, subsidiarity is a dead letter, and that was the main principle of the first 2 constitutional regimes. And now, something that Pope Paul VI called solidarity is the watchword. This is quasi-globalism. It's consolidated government from afar. I explained this, I think, really thoroughly in today's previous video. Do we have a link they can click on, Steffi?
At the end of the video, I can put that on there, yes.
I want to talk today and next about what it means for the 14th Amendment to replace the entire Constitution. What it means for substantive due process to replace a general police powers held formerly by the states. What it means for what you think is best termed solidarity replacing subsidiarity. But before we get to that, I'm going to talk about a couple other things. One, the general guiding principle for today's show is I never trust someone that says, I used to be a libertarian, but now I grew up and I learned that that's wrong. For the record, I've never called myself a full libertarian at no point in my life. I always had the concept from, I'd say, America's second constitutional regime of fusionism, conservatarianism, meaning libertarianism at the federal level because of Article 1, Section 8, because of the 10th Amendment. The federal government has only the powers to legislate very unsexy, amoral things, like build post roads, coin money, levy a tax. But it doesn't have powers to do things like regulate state religion. We're going to talk about that a lot in this second sequel episode. Contraception, porn, abortion, sodomy, gay marriage. It doesn't have the powers to do any of that. Those are issues for the general police powers, for local government. And so that means that you're a conservative if you understand the U.S. Constitution before the 14th Amendment at the state level. Legislating morality is okay. No libertarian would ever say legislating morality is okay at any governmental level, state, county, city, federal. I'm fine with it. I've always been fine with it. But we have to follow the principle of subsidiarity. It has to be something that generically cannot be regulated by fathers or churches or cities if we're going to regulate it at the state level. So when any person I've ever met that said, I used to be a libertarian, but I'm not anymore, I don't trust that person. And it's usually because when someone says I'm not anymore, it means they've gone too far the other way. And I don't necessarily mistrust them because of their initial libertarianism. On the contrary, I mistrust them because what they shifted over to from libertarianism is too far afield. That upsets my daughter. Now, I was going to have Steffi weigh in on something else, but the reason, before we get to today's second topic, second outgrowth of the first topic, what caused the interruption was a very good thing in between video 1 and video 2. Return matchmaking. Us is what we're calling it. Us by Return. It's the matchmaking service that I unveiled last month, about a month ago exactly, together with Nolan Knows. He and his wife Rachel, myself and my wife Steph, are partnering with Return Company and our friend there, Nick at Return, to bring you back to an old world nicety matchmaking, which fathers are failing you. The nice old ladies at your parish councils or your parish donut meetings are failing you. Your grandparents are failing you. Your friends have failed you. If you're a young person or maybe even a middle-aged person who has not been able to make a romantic relationship work to the point of being able to get married. So us matchmaking by Return means that we're not helping you to date. You send us an application, then we actually match you from the top down. And we've been doing interviews. We did 4 today, done 8 all week. We just started the interview process. We have selected from the strength of the applications, the applicants. And let me just say this, and this is where I'd like Steph to weigh in. It's such a great crop of people, and it's so energizing to do these interviews or to look at the applications. When we unveiled this, there was, as there always is on Catholic Twitter, the most negative place in the world. A lot of negative energy saying, oh, you're not going to get any strong candidates. This will be a sausage fest. You're not going to get any female applicants. We got so many more female than male applicants, and we got strength in both pools. But Steph, would you say a word about the high quality level of pretty young virgins that we got in this female category? It was overwhelming.
Yeah, it's basically like a massive, like, in your face to all of those like bitter old feminists on Twitter and the cucky, wimpy men who love them. I loved it. I'm telling you, I am so excited for the men who are in this pool, because the women, one thing I noticed from them, not only are they Catholic, they want to be in a all of them wanted to be in a patriarchy household, but they're virgins, they're beautiful. I mean, I am over the moon. I am completely over the moon with the quality. I think Tim and I have been interviewing 4 people a day, and we'll probably be doing this for the next month just because we really want to get the ball rolling on all of this. And I'm looking at our pool of ladies tomorrow, and I cannot wait to meet them.
Yeah, we on Monday, we did 2 on Wednesday, we did 4 today, we do 4 tomorrow, I believe. And we already know who we're interviewing because Steph, myself, Rachel, Will, Noland, we all went through these applications over the last 2 weeks, and they are just strong. And meeting the people, they're not bogus applications. Strong crop of young men and young women. And I mean, there's a way I could say this, and I don't want to sound cocksure, because that's not what this is about. But we're pushing the issue. We're pushing the envelope. We're pushing the Catholic population to return boldly to the ancien regime in ways that are realistic. And we tend to not push you to return to the ancien regime in ways that are LARPy and unrealistic. And it's funny because there's so much negativity on Catholic Twitter. I have to remark, a lot of people just have bad instincts for this stuff. A lot of people are like, LARP, too much romanticism for the past in ways where we can never go back, too little in ways where we can. And there's that makes a lot of tension between Rules for Retrogrades, this channel, what I do, my 4 books, the kinds of romanticism represented by Catholic Republic, which is most relevant to today's show. Rules for Retrogrades, the book. Don't go to college, a lot of romanticism there. Get married young, have kids young, be a tradesman, be smart, but be a tradesman. And then, of course, the case for patriarchy. There's not a lot of LARPing there. These are 4 areas where we can turn back the clock. Other people want to turn back the clock to what I'd call the way we never were, and it tends to be the popular approach taken by, I helped to popularize this category on TNT, those 4 or 5 years ago, mainstream trads. And I'm just like, no, look, 3 or 4 years ago, talking about feminism was still a no-no. The Overton window's been stretched. Catholic Republic and this very program, episode that I'm doing today and earlier today, are helping to show you America isn't what you thought it was. It's not all good. Most trads know that. It's not all bad either. And it's actually quite Catholic ideologically, which is what I'll be talking about in the rest of the episode. College, not what it's cracked up to be. So what we do is we push the envelope, and it's not the typical trad tropes. Yes, I intensely dislike Pope Francis in some significant way that's not negligible. Do question the validity of his pontificate, though I call him Pope. I'm over 50-50. He is Pope. He's just the worst ever. That's a trad trope. I'm there for it. I'm here for it. Same thing with the TLM. It's infinitely better than the Novus Ordo, which I hate. My home parish is a TLM parish. All of my family's sacraments since I moved here to Mississippi have been at my home parish at a TLM. There's no question on these things. I guess we pick up flack some of the time because we say there's only so many shows we can do on the TLM. Go to the TLM, people. If you have one near you, there's no excuse to be at a Novus Ordo. If you don't have one near you, then get to one when you can. End of story. There's not a lot else to say about it. It's a simple issue. Pope Francis, he's simply evil. We'll find out more, and there is some more stuff to do on him. I could have done a first show back from my exile on YouTube Elba if I wanted to on his CDF. We thought it was going to be Heiner Wilmer, the extremist. Instead, it's the extremist called Tucho Fernandez, Heal Me With Your Mouth. And I'll probably end up doing a show on that tomorrow. Bad stuff is happening by the day, so I'll just kind of catch the whole story as one snowball package deal when there's more news tomorrow. But there is some content to be gotten out of this horrible Francis pontificate, and I do get it out of that. I squeeze the drops out of that. I don't know how many other ways you need to be told. Look, the Novus Ordo is rough. It's awful. Go to the TLM if you can. So I know a lot of YouTube channels are pretty much committed to doing 24/7 TLM stuff, and we'll do stuff if we can. We make recommendations. I get questions about it. Which missile do I like to use? There's some basic stuff here, but there's a lot more content, like people need to get married young. Folks need to be told you probably shouldn't be going to college. This will keep you from getting married young. The colleges are indoctrination centers. You need young men to expect to be the boss in the household. Young women, you need to expect to be the follower of a boss in a household. America is lost in these ways, but not in these other ways. You've been lied to about the ways in which it's lost and in which it's not lost. And that's where, again, we're very out of the mainstream for a trad channel. I get it. Trad has kind of come into the mainstream since summer, fall 2018. And the TNT was very much a part of that. But I have a very different program than other trads. And there's room for us all. But I'd say there needs to be room for these ideas because it's what you can actually do. It's what this channel's known for, right? Thinking outside the box and pushing some good ideas that need to be pushed. Why did I say that I don't trust someone who says I'm a reformed libertarian? I've never met someone that says this who didn't go too far toward big government, nanny government statism. The main folks driving this narrative today are called the post-liberals, comprised of many smaller groups, but one thing they have in common. They all stand for what they call big government conservatism. They all like a robust, quasi-globalist sort of hemisphere-sized nation who controls everything. They think it's Catholic. It's utterly not. They all, the way you prove that is the main Catholic social teaching for political culture is subsidiarity, that it's a grave evil to have a far-off government forcing you, coercing you, instead of a nearby government adjudicating according to the local culture. That's subsidiarity. Well, Pius XI, as I said earlier, calls it a grave evil. In this country, the reason that celebrations like the 4th of July are more bitter than sweet, much more bitter than sweet, not even half-half, the way you could get away with saying it's kind of bittersweet 15 years ago when I was starting law school. I remember being like, this is kind of bittersweet. The country's going down the tubes. It's been down the tubes since the start of this third regime, which is 1868, the passage of the 14th Amendment. If you didn't already watch the earlier video, I explained the three constitutional regimes. Now, the third one was marked by 14th Amendment, substantive due process, replacing general police powers. That is to say, what you think is entailed by solidarity, replacing subsidiarity. Now, subsidiarity, according to really Leo XIII, even though he didn't use the term, Pius IX, though he didn't use the term. Remember, he was overrun by the Italian unification efforts of the Masons like Garibaldi. They forced him into nationalism. And this is what the post-liberals are doing now. They're saying, hey, we're not libs, we're not globalists, we're nationalists. But they're forcing you into basically a continent-sized nation that's far too big to count as subsidiarity, to count as being consonant with the natural law, to be Aristotelian. Aristotle says the biggest polity cannot be even as big as 100,000 citizens. It's got to be more like a city. That's why polis is at the heart of all these terms. Political, polity. All of these terms are like the size of a big city. A function under the assumption that we're talking about, as a state, a big city. A pretty big city. A collection of villages is what Aristotle says. That you have to basically be capable of knowing everyone in your city. 100,000 is too large. And yet you have these post-liberals comprised of people calling themselves in some cases monarchists, in other cases integralists, in other cases distributivists. There's still some other branches of post-liberal that don't have a name yet, but they've been very busy over the last 10 years. And consider this. One thing I like a lot and respect a lot about Kennedy Hall, who many of you probably watch his channel. I mean, I'm not saying it's the only thing. I'm saying one thing that really struck me very favorably is that Kennedy is the only big account or just person at all who I know of who, during the beer bug crisis from late 19 to 2022, had the appropriate response and said, whoa, if I'm going to err on the side of small government, subsidiarity, localism, or big government, what's called solidarity, nanny state, after COVID, 100 times out of 100, I'm going to err on the side of small government, subsidiarity. And that's when Kennedy came out. He said, look, I know a lot of Catholics have heard a lot of rhetoric they probably don't understand too hot against libertarianism, but I now identify as a libertarian. I've never identified as a straight libertarian, but I appreciated this honest response to the globalist overreach during beer bug of Kennedy so much. You know why? People who know me well know what I'm about to say. Because I am a person who, for all my flaws, all my warts, all my shortcomings, and there are many, I love honesty. I love the truth. Go ask Taylor Marshall. I might not be his favorite person or his favorite channel out there, but he'll tell anyone, and he does. Tim loves the truth. Tim doesn't care about what's popular. Does not give an F about what's popular. And you see it reflected even in the show, topic selection, things like that, episode selection. I don't really care. I say things a lot of trads naturally root for. I say a lot of things you guys might have a soft-wired adverse response to. Like the show today. I don't care. And I appreciated about Kennedy that he's like, beer bug made me into a libertarian because it shows what happens when governments have too much power. The public sector is dangerous. Now, he's not a simpleton. Yes, the private sector can become dangerous too, which is why one ought to be socially conservative. Wait, no one's more socially conservative than me. I'm the patriarchy guy. Households. But there is no tension between being socially conservative and, by political economy, really lean hard toward libertarianism, small government. In fact, they go together. But these post-liberals have been announcing that fusionism is dead. The idea of if you're going to be a libertarian, you can't be socially conservative. This is just a lie. I'll say, I told Seamus Coughlin this of Freedom Tunes the other day. I know fusionism isn't dead. Here's why. Because I'm more socially conservative than almost everyone out there. And I'm closer to a libertarian than almost every Catholic out there. Maybe not Kennedy, but I'm very close. Or maybe not Eric from Crisis. But everyone else, I'm closer. So I'm more conservative than you, and I'm more libertarian by economics than you. And the idea is the genius. I need like a Catholic Republic copy here to pat the spine. The genius of America lies in the first two regimes. The first regime, which is purely confederated, 13 little countries in one. And the second regime, which made us into one nation. I'm very hesitant about the shift made in 1788. But as they did it, they still left all the moral muscle, the moral adjudicative and legislative muscle with the states, the several states and the people. Pure subsidiarity being expressed there in the general police power of the 10th Amendment. Well, in place of the general police power where you don't have to be a libertarian. If you're a conservative guy, you live in a conservative state, and there will be moral legislation in place consistent with Christianity. Now, if you go to a blue state, it's going to be different. The states are called the forms of experimentation. As Catholics, we are told one of these principles is right. One is above all the other political principles. Guess what it is? Subsidiarity. Grave Violations of subsidiarity, according to Pius XI, are grave evils. So when you can't take from the state governments powers of legislating morality, here I mean state religion, that's state morality, contraception, porn, abortion, green grass sod, and Skittles matrimony. You can't take those powers from the local governments, or else it's a grave evil. These are the most important moral issues, and guess who the Roman Catholic Church teaches must hold them? The more local sphere. The more distant sphere of government, the bigger government, national government, cannot hold them unless the local government is, of course, generically incapable of legislating them, and they're not. Well, the proof is, Aristotle says, you're not even a polity if you're as many as 100,000 citizens. That's too large to be that's like a hemisphere. That's not a country. A country can never be that large. So it doesn't even go that high. Now, the post-liberals, this is what frightens me. Imagine the fearsome, frightening power, political capital, wielded by one special interest group, the post-liberals, big government conservatives, who, think of Kennedy Hall now. He's my good example. Here, the post-liberals are my bad example. They hold so much political clout that they managed to grow their influence and power in a time when it should have been most on the wane. COVID. Think about that. Think about it. In a time when everybody, left, right, and center, if you mean by leftists, reasonable, like, I guess, Dixiecrats, there aren't that many of them. But left, right, and center, for 3 years, were all rightfully coming to fear government. The way libertarians like Eric or Kennedy or folks like myself, conservatarians, always fear government. That was popularizing. Don't make me get the jab. Don't make me lock down. Don't make me wear a mask. Don't make my kid get the jab. Don't make my kid wear the mask to school. Don't tell me I can't go to a playground. Open up the basketball hoops at my park. That is all a healthy, Catholic, subsidiarian fear of giving from fathers who should be in charge of most of the family's moral decision making, all of it really, except what's out of his competency, to any level of government. And it was a one world government operating under the Mondo Leviathan individual nation governments who'd all banded together, stealing everyone's powers. And during that time, instead of, even though everyone was sort of saying, hey, don't tell me what to do, COVID Leviathan, they weren't connecting the dots, were they? How do I know? Because in that time, you had, I was counting them, post-liberal conference after conference after conference after conference after conference, with it gaining momentum. It should have been going on the wane, not on the wax. Guys like Dr. Patrick Deneen, Adrian Vermeule, Gladden Papin, Sohrab Ahmari. There are many others. Those are kind of the four horsemen of the post-liberal movement. There are many others, but I'm just going to stick to naming the four horsemen. They, and, a changing cast in addition to them. I remember 4 weekends in a row you had post-liberal conferences. One was at Franciscan Steubenville. One was at University of Dallas. One was put on by, who else was it? Another Newman Catholic College. I'm forgetting where. It was like 3 out of 4 weeks or 4 out of 4 weekends. What? I thought everyone's talking more like Kennedy and Eric and me because of COVID. That's right, by the way. COVID should have made you afraid of grave violations of subsidiarity. Another way to put it is this. COVID showed us all why Pope Pius XI stipulates in church teaching that it is a grave evil, not a contingent evil, which you could sometimes do, but a grave evil. You can never do wrong so that good may follow, to give to a further away government what a nearer government can do, a grave categorical evil. Are we allowed to kill in order to save a life? Nope, that's consequentialism. Are we allowed to have an abortion in order to improve the quality of our lives and our other kids? No. Are we allowed to receive communion in a state of mortal sin in order to get square with God? No. You can't do evil that good may come of it. Subsidiarity is a categorical must. So, how are the post-liberals convincing everyone at a time which should be most averse to them being able to propositionally convince others of their points? How did they grow so much in those 3 years? I don't have an answer for that question. The staggering stupidity, gullibility of folks is all I could say. Because there's no other good reason. There's no other good answer. There's no alibi that will avail you in my eyes. The church is very clear. Subsidiarity is the one political principle, collectively, whose violations yield grave evil. We have to talk about what is meant by solidarity, but here's something. Dig this. The great, and I've debated these people. I've debated Patrick Deneen on Paul and Gracia's channel. Congratulations, Paul. You're getting major interviews. Trump wrote you a letter. You and your sister Olivia, had me debate Deneen on your show. I guess you met with Trump. You took a picture with Andrew Tate over the early part of this week. You're really a mover and a shaker, and congrats. I debated Deneen on your show. I debated Josh Hammer for FedSoc at Ole Miss earlier this year. Here's one of the lie. I think it's a lie that the post-liberals use. If you ask me, in my opinion, it's an outright lie. They say that what their goal is for the federal government to take over the legislative capacity of the state governments with regard to religion. Do you like integralism, they say? We should have the state, the Fed take over from the state's religion so we can re-Christianize America. Contraception, pornography, abortion, green grass sod, gay marriage. We should have them take over these issues. Here's the lie. As a matter of fact, last century, in the middle of the century, when the Masons took over this country, the Fed took over these issues. All 6 of these issues. Listen to them again. State religion, establishments of Christianity is what I mean. Official to each of the 50 states. Contraception, porn, abortion, sod, Skittles matrimony. It's already done. Now, the post-liberals talk as if they want to have these issues with subsidiarity and the general police powers of the state guaranteed in America's first 2 constitutional regimes would always be held by the states or the people. And the post-liberals, who I do think are controlled opposition, at least some of them are controlled opposition, what they say is, I want to give your liberty to Washington, D.C., 5,000 miles from Honolulu. Like 6,000 miles, I think, from parts of Alaska, the North Shores of Alaska. But with it, you're going to get something in return. Procedurally, we want to give away your liberty. But what you'll get back is we will give you good federal legislation. Well, the reason I call this an almost outright lie is because these issues were commandeered by the national government from state governments, which is a grave evil, according to Pius XI, last century. In 1947, the Fed commandeered from the state government state religion. And what did they do with it? They took it in the opposite direction. Whereas before, every and any state that wanted could have an official sect of Christianity, state established Christianity. 8 of the 13 states did under the First Amendment. Did you know that? 8 of the 13 states had. We want Catholic state. We could have established it. Until 1947, they federalized it, and they said, no, you're not allowed to have this. From 1776 until 1947, Everson versus Board of Education, it was a state's issue, and the red states had state establishments of Christianity. Some of the blue states even. Number 2, contraception. Red states had it illegal until 1965. The Fed took over the issue, which the post-liberals say they want to do, and it did the exact opposite of what the post-liberals said that the Fed would do when the Fed took over the issue from the states. It made it illegal for the red states to ban contraception. This happened in a case in 1965 called Griswold versus Connecticut. Up until 1965, for all of America's life, any red state who wanted could ban contraception. Well, when the Fed takes something over, it always does the evil thing. You're never going to get a federal ban on some vice. They're going to only push the federal vice. This is one of the reasons why Pius XI said, you're never going to do evil to accomplish good. You're never going to violate the natural law principle of subsidiarity and get a good by it. Anytime the Fed takes over one of these issues, it bans the banning of contraception. It bans the banning of contraception, 1965. 4 years later, in 1969, same thing. The Fed banned the banning of porn in a case called Stanley v. Georgia. 4 years later, you know about this one, 1973. The Fed took over the issue, took it from the states, and banned the banning of abortion in red states. Same in 2003 with regard to sod, green grass. It made it illegal. It banned the banning in a state called Lawrence, in a case called Lawrence versus Texas. And then in 2015, recent history, it banned the banning by red states who before were banning Skittles matrimony. It made it illegal to ban it. Do you understand the stakes here? It's not that complex. Moral issues pertain to people and localities and place. Therefore, the states have always been the forums of experimentation. Red states, which is why you need to live in a red state, will always be Christian and will always agree with you and will always want an official establishment of Christianity in your state. If we overturned Everson and got it back the way it was, then I'm sure Mississippi would become a Baptist state. I don't love that. But there would be a Catholic state. And they would have contraception, porn, abortion. We're the ones that undid Roe. Sod and Skittles matrimony illegal. This is the progression of tyranny. Substantive due processes march through the American institutions. Take away from the red states the ability to illegalize something. And the post-liberals talk about it like this hasn't happened yet. I promise you, they do. I brought this up in my debate with Josh Hammer. I was like, wait, you say you're a post-liberal and you're trying to characterize me as the social liberal? Patrick Deneen has a new book out. It's been getting rave reviews. You guys like substantive due process, the ability to violate subsidiarity at the federal level. What's been done? You got rid of state establishments of Christianity. They made it illegal nationally. You got rid of the bans on contraception in the red states. You got rid of bans on porn in red states. You got rid of bans on abortion in red state. Now, we brought that back. Got rid of bans on green grass sod and Skittles matrimony. That's what happens when you give power away. Local power is best. It's a Catholic principle. It's called subsidiarity. You can't get around it. Violations of it are a grave evil. the post-liberals are talking around these obvious points that ought to be a dead end. There's no answer to them. You know I do nuances on this show. There is no nuance that will avail them. I'll show you the trick they're using to get around this stuff. It's very see-through. Fed took these legislative powers from the states. And in all of the 6 out of 6 issues, which were all overturned with one federal Supreme Court case, they made it illegal for red states to do the right thing. Before 1947, any and all states could have a state establishment of Christianity. Post-liberals, by the way, basically lie to normies about the First Amendment. Normies imply, they take away that the First Amendment means no states can have establishments. No, the First Amendment until 1947 meant the national government could never end state establishments of Christianity. Did you know that? Not unless you're a constitutional scholar. They don't tell this secret. They all tell that lie. 8 of 13 states in 1791, at the time the First Amendment was ratified, had official establishments of some Christian sect. Jefferson and Madison, who wrote the amendment, thought it would be 13 out of 13. 5 of the most liberal states in the North did not have establishments, but 8 did. Official integralism Christianity. People don't tell you this. Why did the wrong thing occur substantively when the Fed broke the moral law procedurally? Because of subsidiarity. It's a natural law principle. The wrong thing substantively will always happen when, according to subsidiarity, it gets encroached procedurally. Now, I don't have the time in this show to explain to you what substantive due process is versus procedural due process. But substantive due process just means that it's partisan. The guy in favor of substantive due process hates subsidiarity. The post-liberals hate subsidiarity. They will not debate me anymore. Once they learn who I am, what I've written on in Catholic Republic, they will cease to debate me. They block me on Twitter, and I don't hang out on Twitter. I don't badger them. They all have me blocked. I think all 4 of the horsemen, 3 of them, I think all 4. I haven't even ever interacted with them. They block me because of who I am. They will not engage with the truth the way I'm telling it. You cannot, as a Catholic, do evil so that good may follow. You can't have global government or hemispheric government, which is what they're calling for. 500 million people in your republic, in your polity? No, Aristotle says 100,000 is too much. Most of our cities wouldn't pass for polities for Aristotle. Okay, so the third section of the joint double episode, second section of this episode, is that what the post-liberals are doing is they're fudging on these 2 Catholic principles, solidarity and subsidiarity. They're fudging. Either subsidiarity is prescriptive and solidarity is descriptive, or vice versa. Now, I had to define some terms earlier. I have to define some terms now. Prescriptive means you must figure it from the top of the equation. The Catholic teaching is subsidiarity is prescriptive. And what is requisite descriptively, what must follow from that, is just a simple description of the state of affairs after that fact, is what we mean by descriptively, and that's what the role of solidarity is. It must somehow fit in with subsidiarity. It's not the other way around. The post-liberals, however, say that solidarity is prescriptive and subsidiarity must be descriptive. This means that there are 2 subsidiarities, one true and one fake, and 2 solidarities, one true and one fake. And that's the way that big government Catholic advocates have been brainwashing folks ever since the Second Vatican Council, when Paul VI pushed this term of solidarity. I'll explain what they've done. if solidarity is prescriptive, and if it means what Paul VI told you it meant, forced government from afar, then subsidiarity cannot be its true definition, which is that it's a grave evil for a faraway government to do what a local government could do in terms of legislating morality. But this would eliminate the possibility of forced government from afar, right? I mean, if you have true subsidiarity, in other words, a bunch of little republics comprising the Northern Hemisphere, what you call America, and each one is like, look, we're 50,000 person republic. We're all a bunch of Catholics, so we're going to have Catholic laws. We all kind of know each other. We're all in the same area. We're a bunch of Catholics. We have Catholic-type laws. All those 6 things. We have sort of soft Catholic integralism. That's good. We have, at the local level here in our little republic, we have, contraception illegal. Why even sell it? Porn, abortion, sod, Skittles, matrimony. We have it all illegalized. Okay? So, but it's done locally, so it's not violating any Catholic principles. Well, if that's the case, then these post-liberals would not be able to push their big government brainwash. And I have called them false opposition. They know that when the federal government takes over the legislative field, they're only going to do evil things. They're going to take over the adjudication or legislation of porn, contraception, abortion, and the other things in order to do the wrong thing. I think they know this because it's all that's ever happened. But they say, no, we want the federal government to take charge in order to adjudicate the right things. Well, all that happens is you grow the scope of government. The state governments can never get the control back, and then the federal government does the evil thing. That's how natural law principles like subsidiarity work. You're never going to do wrong to get the right result. So the post-liberals changed the definition of subsidiarity, because whenever I ask them, I used to ask Sohrab Ahmari when he used to talk to me a little bit, or at least interact some on Twitter, on DMs. How do you get around subsidiarity, man? I know you're from a different country where they have top-down legislation of a more Islamic bent. But how do you get around subsidiarity? It's a grave evil to violate this. And I forget exactly what Sohrab's answer to me was, but what all the other post-libs do, I mean, it wasn't a good answer. They just say, oh, subsidiarity, that's like buying locally. Buy from your greengrocer, not from Walmart, because Walmart's far off. I'm like, that's not the definition of subsidiarity. Definition of subsidiarity is governing locally. You could buy from far off vendors, even if it's sort of bad for the local mom and pop's stores. It might be arguably better to buy from local people, but that's not subsidiarity. Buying locally is not the same as governing locally. Every single post-liberal you know some out there in your life, ask them, what of subsidiarity? So yeah, that's buy local. Or they'll say something that implies go buy local. No, it's not buy local. Govern local. Fathers first, then city governments. It never gets much bigger than that. Small state governments. Big government's evil. The Catholic Church has said this from time immemorial. They'll always give you this sly, politician-like, definition-bending answer. They changed the definition of subsidiarity because they can't answer to subsidiarity. That's not what they want. It's fundamentally anathema to their project. Their project is, we want to grow government. And they're claiming that all these good Catholic laws will come into existence if you grow government. Well, that's never, ever happened. It can't happen and it won't happen. So they changed this new fake subsidiarity to fit what I think is the fake solidarity, to allow solidarity to mean forced government from afar. That makes subsidiarity go from governing locally, its true definition, to buying locally. Now, that's the wrong way. Big government from one nerve center, like Washington, D.C., that can govern an entire continent, more or less, worth of people. A continent-sized government, that's just globalism. What about subsidiarity? Oh, buy locally, then you'll be good. No. You have the false solidarity and the false subsidiarity that you're using under that perverse scenario that kills local government. Now reverse it. See what happens when you make true subsidiarity prescriptive, your first principle, and true solidarity to be descriptive. The way Pius XI says it has to be this way. We don't have a choice. Now, the two true definitions emerge. Everything, for Aristotle, who says you can't have even 100,000 person polity. Montesquieu, who says have three branches of government. Leo XIII, who loved early America in its first two regimes. Now they all make sense. Subsidiarity it's a grave evil to not have local government when local government is capable of doing the job at the level of genus. All of these moral issues are only capacities of local government. Look, Mississippi's a Baptist state. It's got to be a small enough grouping of people that it makes sense. Why would Mississippi be forced by Washington, D.C. to have another state establishment of Christianity? Even Catholicism, right? Maybe Louisiana would have Catholicism. Most Catholic place in the country is South Louisiana. It would probably have Catholicism. I might have to move there. But Mississippi will have baptism, or whatever it's called. Okay? Why is it moral? How is it moral? How does it accord with Dasein, being there? To have someone from far away telling you what religion to have. Okay? Same thing with all the other issues we've discussed. Contraception. Well, California and New York are these very liberal places with a bunch of people who contracept. They're going to choose, because of popular sovereignty, which is a Thomistic Bellarminian principle, they're going to choose the wrong choice. Don't live among them. A res publica has to have, we're going to get to solidarity, is true definition in a second. But you should live among people where there's fellow feeling, or what Aristotle calls concord. The framers called solidarity fellow feeling. That means you should all be alike ideologically. Aristotle called solidarity concord. You should all be the same kind of guy. None of us like contraceptions here in South Louisiana. Well, in California and New York, they're going to have it. You can't change that. It's multiple million people living in those two states alone. You're not going to change that. You're a stranger in a strange land. You're a pilgrim in an unholy place. Get out. That's why I say get out of your blue state, get to a red state. Go to realestateforlife.org, by the way. Get to a place like Mississippi. realestateforlife.org. That's why. A res publica is all about, it's not just about political theory. It's about Dasein, being there. To have true friendship, you have to be in the same place as someone. When your friend moves away, you lose touch. You try not to, but you lose a little more touch every year. Friendship, Aristotle says, requires physical proximity, requires concord. You have to have the same values and you have to be in the same place. Well, it turns out that is the primary reason for being of the polity, Aristotle says in Book 3 of the Politics. St. Thomas says the same thing. Bellarmine says the same thing. Suarez says the same thing. The only people who won't say this, that call themselves Catholic, are the so-called post-liberals, because they're lying to you. Everything makes sense when you say subsidiarity. The ref who's in the position makes the call. The ref who's nearby will tell me whether I stepped out of bounds or not the ref across the field. So once you have the local government making the laws according to natural law mixed with the local customs and the local climate, the local growing patterns for crops and things like that, then all of a sudden, what do you have? All these little biospheres. You have farmers in the Central Valley of California, the one conservative place in California. In South Louisiana, you have a bunch of professionals who are all Catholics that are all able to go to church together, fast together. The businesses know we're not going to sell any meat on Friday. In Mississippi, in South Mississippi, they all go to church at the same time. They move, this actually pisses me off. They move Halloween if it falls on a Sunday. And they all agree and look, I'm the stranger in the strange land. It makes sense for them to do it this way. I'm a Catholic who loves Halloween, right? It's our holiday. We made it up. Pope Leo V made up the holiday. They don't like it. So if it's too near a Sunday, they move it and they celebrate whatever on October the 28th or 29th. Because locality. You make laws according to the people there. You could say, it should be one law for everyone. That violates Catholic teaching. It's not realistic. And it's evil. It's not just that it's not realistic, it's that it's evil. So solidarity is descriptive, and it fits according to subsidiarity, which is prescriptive. What is solidarity? It's just what Aristotle calls concord. Go read book 3 of the Politics. It's what Madison and the writers at the Federalist called fellow feeling. Now, they kind of got this wrong because they wanted to have pluralism in a big country. Every other political theorist from Aristotle to Montesquieu said no. You cannot have a big country. It has to be small. And you cannot have multiple factions of competing special interests. You have to have just one kind of dude in this little country. Got to be small, and it's got to be ideologically pure. If it gets too big, it gets ideologically impure. If you want to make it ideologically impure, you just grow the geographic scope of the government. So this is the sense in which true solidarity, Aristotelian concord, follows. If you live around people that are just like you, Catholic, they are fasting on Fridays, no meat on Fridays. They revere the Virgin Mary. You have a church at town square. You all do this. You all say the rosary. Maybe there could be a quiet 15 minutes for people to say the rosary with a bell that rings at noon. When you're all crammed into a little space and you're all similar, what naturally, descriptively follows? Concord, fellow feeling, solidarity. When you're living in a neighborhood with a bunch of people that like the same stuff, you have concord. It makes no sense to say that in a large plural nation you will have any solidarity. So Paul VI just crammed solidarity down and made it into something it's not, some big government principle. You must love I have to love everyone in a broad, abstract Christian way, but I don't have to respect them and I don't have to live among them. I want to live in a polis, a polity. Polis means a small country. It doesn't mean a city. You've been taught it means a city, not in the political sense. Polis means a city-state or a small country. You should live only around people that are like you. Pluralism is a sham. The post-liberals push a liberal lie. They say they're against liberalism. They're not. They're for a big, plural, continent-sized, quasi-globalist regime. This is liberalism. I go back and forth as to whether or not regime 1, the Articles of Confederation, is best, and regime 2, early Constitution, part confederated, part consolidated, is best. Most of the time, I just think the Articles of Confederation are best. The strongest local government. Keep federal government weak. What to do now? I don't know, but you need to read Catholic Republic. I don't know exactly what to do, but you need to read Catholic Republic. It lays this all out in, I think, a more fun and a slightly more detailed way. I've done my best today, but when I celebrate the 4th of July and I get verklempt, sad, nostalgic, For not even the 80s when I was born. But I just get sad for the idea of America. The 80s were a little better than things are now. But it was already 100 years too late. 1868 is when they founded the new third tyrannical substantive due process, solidarity, forced government from afar, pluralism regime. I meant to do this show on 4th of July, but I was banned. So, hoping for the best for our country, patriotism falls under loving your father and your mother, loving your fatherland, your motherland. And I wish the best for our country. I don't hold high hopes for myself. I wish the best, but I don't realistically hope. I mean, you can always hope, but wishing involves less intellectual potency. Yeah, wish things were great. I'd take the first regime or the second regime. The fact of the matter is, though, once you grow government, it's called the ratchet effect. You can't get it back. Third regime, once the post-liberals of the middle 20th century, proto-post-liberals, they're just the old left. Once they grow government so big, you can't get it back. And they're trying to grow it even bigger. By the way, Adrian Vermeule, post-liberal extraordinaire, lots of you Catholics out there are duped by him. Totally pro-lockdown and vax stuff. I forget the specifics. Most of the post-liberals were. Everyone, do it the honest Kennedy Hall way. If you don't know much about this issue and you were interested by these two videos today, look into it the way Kennedy Hall looked into it. If you're going to err on one side, too little government or too big a government, COVID should have showed you err on the too little side. God bless you, parish orphans in retrograde. Deus Volt. It's good to be back from Elba. I want to stay off Elba as long as I can, though we're living on borrowed time. Please go subscribe to me on Rumble. Deus Volt.